This is the BioCentury Show.
The BioCentury Show is brought to you by Pharon Pharmaceuticals. Pharon is developing a novel immunotherapy that could reshape treatment for high-risk myelodysplastic syndromes, especially in patients who have relapsed after standard therapies. Pharon's lead candidate, bexmarilimab, is a first-in-class anti-CLEVER-1 antibody that reprograms immune-suppressive macrophages and reignites the immune system, making tumors more responsive to treatment. Phase 2 data from the BEXMAB study shows that bexmarilimab can overcome treatment resistance to standard of care aciditine in relapsed refractory high-risk myelodysplastic syndromes. This approach could unlock new possibilities for patients and doctors alike.
Welcome to the BioCentury Show. I'm Jeff Cranmer, Executive Editor here at BioCentury, and today I am delighted to be joined by S.J. Lee. He is the CEO of Orum Therapeutics. S.J. founded Orum in 2016 after having served as head of research for the Asia Pacific R&D at Sanofi. Orum is based in Daejeon, South Korea, and Lexington, Massachusetts. It's leading the development of Degrader antibody Conjugates, also known as DACs. It has deals with Bristol Myers Squibb and Vertex, and it's raised over $120 million in funding, including money raised this year in an IPO on Korea's KOSDAQ. SJ is a familiar operator on both sides of the Pacific, having earned a PhD in biophysics from the University of California, Berkeley. And he also worked as a postdoc at Stanford, just down the road from where I sit in the San Francisco Bay Area. SJ, welcome to the BioCentury Show.
Thank you, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, SJ, as CEO of a company that straddles two countries, two continents, East and West, it's incredibly timely to have you on the show. We recently wrapped up our BioCentury East-West conference in Singapore. You were up on the stage, as I recall. And next year, this conference heads to South Korea. That'll be in the spring, so that should be quite a fun event. And it's timely to have you on because never before have Western biopharma companies been so interested in sourcing innovation in East Asia. And as someone who founded a company in East Asia and then very quickly moved to globalize it by setting up shop in the greater Boston area, I think you'll have many insights to share with our viewers. Now, China usually dominates the cross-border discussion about opportunities for Western biopharmas and VCs to source innovation from Asia. But more and more, we're seeing big deals out of Korea. Your IPO was one of the bigger ones on KOSDAQ for a biotech. How should Westerners be thinking about opportunities to source innovation from Korea? And really, how should they think about Korea in the context of the East Asian life sciences ecosystem?
Sure. Yeah, it is an exciting time. I mean, Korea sits in a really unique intersection in East Asia. Seoul is about 2 hours flight to Tokyo, Beijing, and Shanghai, right in the middle. And unlike the bigger neighboring countries, Korea is not big enough for biotechs to have a domestic market as its main commercialization plan. So biotechs like Orum have a global plan from day one. So I think that makes Korea quite unique. Also, there's a very vibrant startup ecosystem with local funding and a local, public market for IPOs, like for companies like Orum. Also, Korea has a long history with its neighboring countries, so historically and culturally know how to work together well.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, for those not familiar with the Korean biotech ecosystem, the big company known as LG was once quite a player in the life sciences, and then after a change in its strategy about 25 years ago or so. It sort of unleashed this wave of biotechs that has really begun making a bigger and bigger imprint on the global life sciences scene. And one place we see this is at meetings like the upcoming Bio meeting, which will be in Boston in just a couple of days from when we were having this conversation. And I know, SJ, last year, the Korea delegation, I think for the first time, was the biggest international delegation of all. What's driving that?
Yeah, I think it's maybe both the global intent of Korean companies is also, necessity for Korean companies to partner with larger companies. Korea has been sending a large delegate to Bio and JPM for partnering needs. I think more and more Korean companies are also meeting investors as well. I've seen just the last 2 years, the number of US VCs flying over to Seoul to meet Korean biotech almost double in the last 2 years. So I think there's more interest in, for example, NewCo opportunities with Korean assets as well.
Excellent. And the NewCo trend, of course, really picked up. It kicked off a few years ago, this trend where we're seeing Western VCs find assets primarily in China, also in Korea, and then build a company around it. We saw more than 5 to 10 deals announced at JP Morgan just this year. And then speaking of other bio events, I know when thinking about Korea delegations, you'll see Korean delegations very active in Japan, right? And very active at China's international meetings. And I don't think there's a lot of biotechs that really go to all of these meetings and have a strong presence. So I think that really speaks to what you're saying in terms of Korean biotechs being very comfortable working with China. I know that you yourself have some partnerships in China. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have partners all over the world, including China, India, and other parts of the country. We work with the best of the world in terms of CROs, CDMOs, et cetera. So yeah, we're focusing on not just Korea or the US, but work with anybody who could be a good partner for us.
And we'll dig into your BMS deal and your Vertex deal in the second half of the show when we really tuck into the science. But staying with the globalization themes and the cross-border partnership themes, I'm wondering, SJ, what can Western VCs or biopharmas do to build better relationships with Korea biopharmas as they look to learn about the country, learn about the key sources of innovation in the country?
Yeah, I think meeting Korean innovators in these international meetings is one thing, but I would also encourage to look into other non-traditional means of meeting. If you're going to visit East Asia, you can stop by Seoul to meet the people locally. There's a lot of I think very unique innovation in Korea. A lot of the biotechs are founder-driven, and many founders are academics that have a very unique idea they want to commercialize. They may not have the drug discovery experience, but they have really interesting platforms. For example, there's a company who got recent funding from a large pharma CVC. They have a very unique degrader technology that uses like a lysine mimetic molecular glue approach, which is very unique and not easily found in other parts of the world. So I think and some of these companies are kind of not going to these external meetings, and sometimes you need to have the right connection to meet these companies. So yeah, I think stopping by Seoul and meeting the local people, the government organizations, you could find some less sort of viewed or reviewed opportunities that is quite interesting.
Are there, you mentioned sort of unique opportunities and sort of almost a Korean flavor of biotech being very founder driven. Are there particular technologies, modalities, indications that are a real strength in Korea as opposed to other countries?
I wouldn't say it's particularly strong in one or the other, but there has been ADC companies like Orum that's more unique. For example, when Orum started Degrader antibody conjugates, we didn't want to work on what everybody else was working back in 2019. There were a lot of companies working on site-specific linkers, better toxin payloads. As a Korean company, we do need to focus on very novel science. So we decided to focus on payloads that nobody else really worked on well. So that was the degrader, using degraders as payloads. So I think you're going to see companies like Orum where trying different things that is not necessarily a sort of a global trend yet. But nonetheless, you got VCs that are more risk averse in terms of platform innovation that can kind of help flourish the novel science in the region here.
I'm curious. One thing that we chatted about when we spoke earlier was what Korean biopharmas need to do to kind of get better, to make their mark on the world map. I'm wondering, is there's sort of a lesson in there in terms of being more of a first mover? When I traditionally think of Korean biotech, maybe back in the day, it seemed like it was more of a fast follower. What lessons might you have for some of the newer Korean startups in terms of making their mark?
Yeah, I think Korean companies across the industries have started out copying what the West is doing or other bigger countries are doing. And then once they get used to the copying, they try to make things better. But once they get better, they need to innovate. So that's a third step. So I think for biotech, we're maybe at the second step. The Korean companies are pretty good at manufacturing biosimilars, making biobetters. For example, there's a Halozyme biobetter that's patent protected, and in Korea, for example. But then I think the next step would be to create something totally new. But that third step requires some time. But I think the vibrant startup ecosystem would help fund those innovative ideas. And the real important piece is to globalize. For example, there's been successes in the K-pop industry. They've been able to kind of train young artists to become global entertainers like BTS. So this globalization piece is not there yet for biotech. So I think that globalization piece with the first mover advantage is the winning playbook for Korean biotech.
Oh, that's an awesome example. I can tell you that I'm well versed in Blackpink, and my 11-year-old has taught me all about Baby Monster. So I'm fairly up to speed, and I certainly wish Korean biotech the same success as some of the K-pop artists have had. It could just be a matter of time. You mentioned funding. I wonder, before we dig into the science of your company, what is the funding environment like? Are these Korean startups reliant on international funding, or is there enough funding at the early stages to get startups off the ground in Korea?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of government funding in the early stages of a company, kind of like an equivalent of SBIR in Korea. So that's quite abundant. Research grants for biotech are there. Also, seed funding, Series A, Series B funding is there. But it's harder to get funding as your company grows to a certain size. For example, to run a global phase 3 trial, it might be difficult just to raise money in your local capital market. So I think that's why there's a lot of interest for Korean biotech companies to partner their clinical asset with larger cap pharma.
Excellent. Well, thank you, SJ. We're going to go to a quick break and then we're going to come back and we are going to talk about DACs, Degrader Antibody Conjugates, and the Orum journey, how it ended up in Massachusetts as well, and how it got out in front of this very hot space.
For 3 decades, BioCentury has helped biopharma executives and investors make business-critical decisions and build larger networks with peers across the biopharma innovation ecosystem. Our goals are simple: gather the right people in the room to partner, network, and debate critical issues facing the biotech industry. BioCentury's upcoming events span the globe and feature topics from translation to company building to deal-making and investment. We hope to see you on the road at an upcoming BioCentury event. Visit biocenturyontheroad.com for more information and to register.
Welcome back to the BioCentury Show. I'm Jeff Cranmer, and I am in conversation with S.J. Lee, founder and CEO of binational biotech Orum. Let's delve into Orum's technology. S.J., I know in the early days, the company had one focus on cell-penetrating KRAS antibodies. Everyone knows that KRAS was long a tough nut to crack. Now the focus is primarily on degraded antibody conjugates. Can you tell us about that evolution, what happened to the original program, and how you refined your focus?
Yeah, Orum started out in 2016 focusing on a novel intracellular cell-penetrating antibody platform, and our lead asset was a KRAS antibody, with this platform. And we, back then there was no approved KRAS drugs at the moment, and we were trying to be the first in that space. After a while, we realized that we didn't have enough efficacy to really meet the needs of the patients in the clinic. So we evolved the technology toward degrader antibody conjugates. We already had the know-how in the antibody space. We added a degrader platform, which we thought was a good fit. Degraders are catalytic and they can target undruggable targets. So we started with GSPT1 degraders on antibodies, and that became the Orum of the platform of today. And I think biotechs who really want to work in the first, who want to be a first mover, would be ready to evolve their focus into what works well based on the patient needs.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned the GSPT1 program. Is that the one that you ended up partnering with Bristol Myers?
BMS, yes.
Excellent. And I'm curious. CD33 is part of that. It hasn't always been an easy target for your run-of-the-mill, regular old ADCs, antibody drug conjugates. Why is an antibody degrader conjugate better against CD33?
That's a great question, Jeff. I think it's because DACs, before even DACs were a popular term, we called our approach, TPD square. Square because it's dual targeting, meaning you first target the payload with the antibody, but the degrader itself has a biological targeting because it's a targeted agent. What I mean by that is CD33 is also expressed in some normal cells like hematopoietic stem cells. But unlike most toxins, GSPT1 degraders are not great at killing hematopoietic stem cells versus AML cells, for example. So you have that built-in distinction, biological distinction between normal versus cancer. And with that, we thought that it would be an excellent opportunity to put a GSPT1 degrader payload on a CD33 antibody. And that asset called ORM6151 ended up partnering with BMS in an asset acquisition deal.
Right, and it got you a handsome up front and some room to run with some milestones, which is not only validating, but it no doubt helps pad the coffers a little bit. I'm curious, I know the company's a little tight-lipped about its other targets at the moment, at least. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd love to hear about how you chose CD33, chose your other targets, and where does a degrader conjugate have benefits over other modalities?
Yeah, I can share you a little bit more about our 1153, ORM 1153 program. This is another GSPT1 degrader on an antibody that targets multiple heme indications. And GSPT1 in general is excellent at killing heme cells in particular versus other type of cells. So it's very heme specific in a sense. It's also very good at killing neuroendocrine tumor cells, including small cell lung cancer. So we have another program targeting neuroendocrine solid tumors with this payload. So those are the two programs that are closer to the clinic. For the 1153, we're aiming to clear IND end of next year. But we're also cognizant of the vast opportunities of the degrader payload space because GSPT1 will not be the last degrader conjugated to an antibody, and we want to be the first to put a non-GSPT1 degrader in the clinic as well. So we recently been focusing on discovering novel degrader payloads on multiple antibodies. And the way we decide on the payload and antibody is first we focus on the indication with the clinical unmet need. And then we look at the targets that degraders can address in that indication. And then we try to match the right antibody target with that degrader target. And then once that's decided, then we look for, what's the right antibody, what's the right linker, and how many do we have to put it on, like in what manner, what's the antibody format that goes well with that conjugate. So it's a very, there's a lot of tuning parameters, and that's sort of our know-how. But in a nutshell, that's how we decide on the target pairs.
How far off might something that's a non-GSPT1B in terms of development?
Yeah, I think you'll hear for the near term more about our GSPT1 platform. Hopefully next year we'll be able to talk a little bit more about the other stuff we're cooking right now. You'll hear more about 1153 maybe later in a medical conference this year. Also, we've been kind of noticing a lot of excitement around I&I for degraders. And I think that space would be quite interesting for a degrader antibody conjugate approach because degraders, unlike cytotoxics, not only can kill an immune cell, it can modulate it in a more subtle manner. So it might be more amenable for DACs to be active in I&I versus, let's say, ADC that just kills a cell.
Are there particular I&I indications that you think might be particularly amenable to this?
We're still exploring which indications would be best for us. So maybe at a later point of time, I'd be able to tell more about it.
Excellent. Well, as you know, we've been following the Orum story since 2016, so we continue to look forward to following the journey as you progress. Maybe we'll switch gears now. We have a little bit of time left. It's no small thing to lead a company that has two languages, two cultures, two primary locations, partners in China, partners in God forbid, New Jersey, where I'm from. And I'm just curious, it's also an incredibly stressful time. I mean, we talk about it a lot, but you can't say it enough. I mean, it's been difficult to raise money, geopolitical tensions between some of the major players in biopharma, at least their governments, it's a little stressful at times. How do you successfully lead during these times? Ongoing bear market, it does seem like Korea's kind of coming out of it. But also, how do you keep a staff that has insanely different time zones, quite different cultures, humming as one organization? What does that take for you as a CEO to kind of lead the troops?
Yeah, I think that's a great question for anybody who wants to lead an international team. I was lucky to have that experience when I was at Sanofi leading teams in China, Japan, Korea, and other parts of the world. I think as a biotech founder, you need to really design your culture for innovation. And if you add that international angle, you do need to spend and invest in a lot of time in communicating across different cultures. For example, some cultures are more, communication by written language, and other cultures by face-to-face and body language, very implicit communication. And you need the other sides to understand the different modes of communication. And this is one of the reasons we even in the early days when we were, tiny, we invested, at that time quite, some money in a 360 video camera, so the U.S. team can read the atmosphere of the room in Daejeon, South Korea. So yeah, I still try to help our U.S. and Korea team understand each other and work well, and so far it's been working quite well.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Well, SJ, thank you so much for coming on the BioCentury Show. We look forward to continuing to following the journey of Orum. That's a U.S. Korea biotech working in a very hot space, and we look forward to the next readout.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Nice talking to you.
Great talking to you as well.
BioCentury would like to thank Faron Pharmaceuticals for supporting the BioCentury Show podcast. Faron believes bexmarilimab's early data suggests that product could offer new hope for high-risk MDS patients with limited treatment options. Learn more at faron.com.